$20 million on an ad campaign will save more than $160 billion in tax.
Not a bad investment.
Not a bad investment at all. Let me repeat that. $20 million ad campaign, and Treasury's preferred tax model beaten, one knocked up by Julia Gillard's office in 3 days, installed, and the difference between the two over 10 years is likely to be $160 billion. Now that is, excuse me, see I lose my voice when I even think about that. That is why, well, that's the stakes that we're playing for in this boom. It's really just a grab for cash, and unfortunately you, the taxpayer, have missed out massively. And, well, we haven't even seen the MRRT passed yet, but presumably we will. So I want to now talk briefly about the impact of the mining industry on the broader economy. And again, we'll publish some research soon that will flesh all of this out. But here is the thrust of some of the key points. The mining boom has seen a surge in the exchange rate. The surge in the exchange rate makes us going overseas on holidays cheaper, makes us purchasing cars and televisions from overseas cheaper, but it also makes our exports more expensive. The surging dollar has had adverse impacts on our tourism industry, it's had adverse impacts on our manufacturing industry, it's having a very significant impact on our education industry because foreign students find Australia an increasingly expensive place to come. Now, what we do in this research is look at the impact of the mining boom on mining exports and on non-mining exports. And what we find, effectively, is that there is no real increase in net exports at all. That the increase in mining exports is virtually offset by the reduction in non-mining exports, which is part of the explanation of the following. We are in the middle of a resources boom, we're in the middle of a mining boom, we're told again and again and again how good it is for exports and how good it is for the economy. Our current account deficit is expected to deteriorate. We're in the middle of a mining boom, and according to Treasury, our current account deficit is heading back towards 6% of GDP, which is when Paul Keating said we were living in a banana republic. How can you have a mining boom? How can you have an export boom? How can it be so great for the economy that mining is generating all these exports, when in fact our current account deficit, again, is heading towards banana republic territory? Now the answer is a little bit complex because it's partly to do with the way we put our national accounts together, but when we export a lot of coal, we export a lot of iron ore, but when we export profits, when we export 83% of these enormous profits in dividends to countries overseas, that actually harms our current account deficit. So if you ask the mining industry, they'll be quite explicit with you. Look, mining's great. Why is it great? Well, it creates a lot of jobs. No, it doesn't. It creates a lot of exports. No, it creates a lot of mining exports. It destroys a lot of exports. So, and what they don't mention is, of course, as I said, the other side of the ledger. Posting all those dividend checks out is actually bringing our current account deficit back to the levels that we worried about. The other thing they'll tell you is that they pay a lot of tax. No, they don't. Mining industry pays a significantly lower level of rate of average corporate tax rate than other companies. All companies face the same corporate tax rate, but the tax concessions available to the mining industry are significantly greater than those in other industries. Nicholas Gruen recently did some fascinating comparison between tax concessions for research and development in Australia in mining and tax concessions for research and development in Canada. Australia and Canada have got mining industries about the same size. Nick estimates that mining tax concessions in Australia are $4.5 billion more than the tax concessions for R&D that the Canadians provide. So Australia has this incredibly innovative, research-focused mining industry. We actually do 10 times as much research and development in our mining industry as those dumb Canadians. Now, the reason is because we've got really smart lobbyists, and the smart lobbyists have actually created a definition of research and development for our mining industry, which includes the actual mining activity. So when you mine, as long as you mine in an innovative way, the actual process of mining can be deducted at 150% as research and development. So if you've got a mine shaft you want to widen, just get someone to come in and give you some innovative ideas about how to do it. Take some notes while you're doing it. Record your research and save $4.5 billion a year in tax. So the mining industry, it's a big employer. No, it's not. It creates a lot of exports. Well, it creates a lot of mining exports, but it crowds out exports in other industries. Pays a lot of tax. No, it actually pays quite a low rate of tax, and the royalties that it pays are trivial. And it also actually receives an enormous amount of subsidies, direct and indirect, including, for example, large chunks of our stimulus package went to building the infrastructure, coal loaders, etc., etc. So the mining industry, and there's this fantastic website. This Is Our Story. Has anyone seen their ads at the movies? You don't see them on TV, but they play them at the movies. So they're online. Fantastically slick website telling you about all the benefits of the mining boom. And in our upcoming paper, we basically go through them one at a time. And let me just end with one last argument the mining industry relies very heavily on, and that is the multiplier effect. See, the thing about the mining industry is that, sure, it might only employ 200,000 people, but the thing about miners is that unlike all other workers, they spend their wages. So what happens is that mining workers come to pubs and they buy beer. Mining workers go to restaurants and they buy dinner. Mining workers buy televisions, they buy houses, they do all sorts of things. And that creates jobs in other industries. And that's called the multiplier effect. Now, the mining industry and the agriculture industry are relatively unique in Australia in that they're the only industries that can ever be bothered to pay Access Economics to calculate the multiplier effect for them. So, true, I mean, you've never heard anyone say, let's spend money on nurses because of the multiplier effect. You've never heard anyone say, sure, we might only employ 5 times as many people as the mining industry, but when you combine the multiplier effect with that, we actually employ 15 times more people than the mining industry. It's only these small industries that are rich enough and smart enough to go and pay Access Economics or anyone else to come up with these multipliers that can create these dubious arguments. So the mining industry, which again only employs 205,000 people, claims on its website that it creates 750,000 jobs because of the multiplier effect. Well, what we did was what Dave did was calculate, well, if we actually applied the multiplier for every industry, we calculate that there'd be 30 million jobs in Australia. There's only 11 million people in the labour force. The point is the multiplier effect is, the economy is a cycle. And one industry's expenditure is another industry's revenue. But again, mining and agriculture seem particularly adept at running these arguments. So yeah, look, as I said, I just wanted to spell out our research that's coming up. I think it's important for a number of reasons, and the main one is that there is an old-fashioned fight about distribution that frankly needs having when it comes to the mining industry, because the boom that we are experiencing is a boom in price, not a boom in output. It's a boom in profit, not a boom in wages. But it's a boom that's harming, in the long-term effect, it's driving manufacturing offshore, which is unlikely to come back when the boom ends. It's harming jobs in tourism, and in many regional areas that have no mining jobs are losing employment there. But also, this is Australia's literally sovereign wealth. These are resources that live in our ground that were never purchased by the people who extract them. And the opportunities, if with fair taxing of these resources, the opportunity to return that $160 billion, and there is no if you want revenue to address Indigenous disadvantage, what more equitable place to take it than from the mining companies taking the resources out from underneath their ground? If you want to address health and education deficits in Australia, Indigenous or non-Indigenous communities, what better place to get the money from than there? Frank, if you want to tackle climate change, if you want to build new infrastructure for our cities, there is literally no more economically efficient place to go and find enormous sums of money, for the simple reason that these excess profits, these rents, these super profits, by definition, are the profits that are earned over and above what's required to keep the miners performing their activity. The whole point, literally the definition of a rent or a super profit, is that it's the cash over and above what's required to keep someone in business. So the money is there. It's not spread through the economy nearly as effectively as people think it is. And we've done a survey and asked people effectively, how many people do you think work in the mining industry? What percentage of the economy do you think accounts for the mining industry? Now, I've already told you the answers, so you don't count, but a survey of 1,400 representative Australians finds that the average Australian thinks that 16% of the workforce is employed in mining, and that 34% of the economy is taken up by mining. The actual numbers are 1.8% and 9%. People think nearly 10 times as many people work in mining as actually do. People think that mining contributes more than 3 times as much to the economy as it actually does. So what we've experienced, thanks to $20 million worth of advertising, thanks to Mitch Hook being so good at his job, is that we've created a public perception that Australia rides on the miners' back, when the statistics show us otherwise. But clearly, most of the economy has got nothing to do with mining activity. Clearly, most of it was there before the boom. Hopefully, most of it will be there after the boom. And to put this into some long-term historical perspective, in the 1950s, the agriculture industry accounted for 30% of Australia's GDP. So with one last quiz, what's agriculture account for today? Dave?
I forget exactly.
I think it's. I was going to say.
1.5?
I was going to say 2. It's tanked. So my point is, the economy's gone through this massive transformation. If you'd have said to a policymaker in Australia, imagine an Australian economy with an agriculture industry a tenth of its current size. Imagine the whaling. Actually, we stopped whaling. Used to be counted in agriculture, or fisheries. Our economies experience these transformations all the time. I've probably said it here before. In 1980, if you were to project the number of people working in the mobile phone industry, you'd project 0. In 1990, the number of people in the internet industry, you'd project 0. In 1950, the agriculture economy, a third of the economy, we probably thought it would be the same today. So the mining industry has gone through this short and big boost in its output. And the question that we have to ask ourselves as citizens, if not as policymakers, is how do we take this boom and appropriate the benefits for the country as a whole, because we know the booms come and the booms go.